We're building a massive walk-in closet for Mrs. CityBilly in this episode of CityBilly Adventures.
My wife and I grew up in the suburbs of Northeast Ohio, and we started our family there too. Then a few years ago, we stumbled into this dilapidated estate property that just had way too much potential to pass up. Follow along as we DIY our way through creating our dream estate, one project at a time. A wise man once said, "You're from the city, but you like hillbilly things. You're a CityBilly."
So we're back for another big project in our Master Suite Remodel series. If you haven't seen the first episode,
shame.
Our bedroom ceiling collapsed, and now we're remodeling the whole room. In the first episode, we talked about how everything in this house is oversized, and the Master Suite is no exception. This bedroom and bathroom has the same footprint as our entire first house. We've tried to find creative ways to make the wide open spaces a little more functional. The biggest change we made was to bump this closet out into the room to eat up some of the wasted space. We framed the new walls, but then we put a pin in this closet project while we focused on the rest of the bedroom. We weren't exactly prepared to start this massive project when we did, and we were trying to get the bedroom back to a livable condition as quickly as possible. Now that the bedroom is somewhat under control, we can focus on the closets.
The first thing we did was to put the remaining blown insulation back up into the attic. Then we threw up new drywall on the walls and ceiling. The majority of our house has a rustic farmhouse theme, but Mrs. CityBilly wanted to go extra girly for her closet, starting with this chandelier. Then she painted the walls and added an accent wall with peel and stick wallpaper.
Now, one of the issues with creating your dream anything is taking all those rough ideas that you've been super excited about and making some tough, final decisions on exactly what you want and how you want it laid out. The fun part is looking at tons of pictures and ideas, but when it's time to put it all together, sometimes the fun turns into stress. One of the nice things about doing projects yourself is there's less pressure to make every decision at the beginning of the project. Mrs. CityBilly wasn't 100% sure how she wanted the closet laid out. So we started with the things that she was sure about. Once those were in place, it made it easier to envision the rest of the project. There's all kinds of cool computer programs out there that help with design, but here at CityBilly Adventures, it's a little more old-fashioned. The plan is to have a bank of drawers along the back wall. On the left side will be a tall hanging rack for dresses, 2 traditional hanging racks, and shoe storage. On the right will be a combination of hanging racks and shelves with a large jewelry cabinet.
I used 2x6s and plywood to build bases for the built-ins. If you're wondering what's with all the holes in the plywood, I was able to get this 3/4 inch plywood for free from a local factory. They get their raw materials in boxes built with these 4x4 plywood sheets. The holes make the boards almost useless, but they're perfect for this since they'll be covered up by the built-ins, and they saved us a ton of money on material. Leveling the bases now means we can install the rest of the built-ins without having to shim them later.
like a glove.
So we talked about starting with the things that you're sure about. Mrs. CityBilly knew from the beginning that she wanted a bank of drawers along this wall, so I started with those.
I used more of that free plywood to build the cabinet carcasses. I assembled the carcasses with pocket screws and glue. This pocket hole machine really speeds up the process. Since these cabinet carcasses are for drawers, we could get away with using just strips of plywood for the top, bottom, and back. These areas won't be visible, so we were able to build them using a little less material. For the sake of time, I'm glossing over the details on how to build cabinets. We'll cover that in a separate video. These 3 cabinets will hold a total of 6 large drawers. I'm adding a row of 5 smaller drawers along the top. Since there's less room to work in these smaller drawers, I attached the drawer slides before assembly. I probably should have done the same for the large drawers, but I was so excited to get them in the closet that it didn't cross my mind. It's probably overkill, but I used 2 sets of drawer slides for each large drawer. Mrs. CityBilly tends to overstuff her drawers, and I wanted to make sure they were extra sturdy. Unfortunately, this was the last thing I could build with the free plywood. We made several trips to the hardware store to stock up on 3/4-inch sanded plywood for the remainder of the built-ins. My shop is far from complete, and we didn't have room to store enough plywood for the entire project. So we bought a handful of sheets at a time while we worked through the built-ins. Up to this point, I've always just used my best guess for figuring out how to cut up my material. But with the cost of plywood skyrocketing, I wanted to make sure I was creating the least amount of material waste as possible. I stumbled on this free app called Cutlist Optimizer. It allows you to input your pieces, and it'll figure out the most efficient way to cut up the plywood. You can save your diagrams as a PDF or print them off for reference. Besides Mrs. CityBilly's closet, I have a ton of drawer building in my future. I found a shop on Etsy that sells custom branding irons so I can stamp my logo on all my upcoming projects. I watched a bunch of videos in preparation for this project, and everyone builds drawers a little different. I used glue and pocket screws to assemble the drawer boxes, and glue and pneumatic staples to attach the 1/2-inch plywood bottom. I chose this method because it was a little quicker than cutting channels in the sides of all the drawer boxes, and I wanted a little sturdier bottom than the traditional 1/4-inch plywood. For the countertop, I went to our local lumber yard and had them glue up 1.5-inch slabs of poplar. I used my trim router to put a small chamfer on the front. I put a small block of scrap wood on either end to prevent tear out. Mrs. CityBilly wanted a hutch surrounding the bank of drawers with a shelf around eye level. I built soffits out of 2x4s and attached them to the ceiling joists. The soffits give me something solid to attach the top of the hutch, as well as crown molding around the perimeter of the built-ins. At this point, most of the remaining built-ins are just big wooden boxes. We cut the sides 24 inches deep, which is right down the middle of a 4x8 sheet of plywood. The sides won't be visible, so I saved a little time and used glue and staples instead of pocket holes. Then I went back and added construction screws for additional strength. I used 1/4 inch plywood for the back. Since the boxes are going to be attached to the closet at the top and bottom, I could get away with thinner plywood for the back. The back is there mainly to keep the box square and to give it some rigidity. The wall juts out into the room here, so there isn't room to put another 2-foot deep hanging rack, but it's a perfect spot to put shoe shelves. I cut a 30-degree angle on the front and back of each shelf. Instead of sitting flat, Mrs. CityBilly wants her shoes displayed at a slight angle. We glued and stapled each shelf in place. Then we went back and added construction screws. The back is more 1/4 inch plywood. Since the shelves were installed at an angle, I needed to shoot the staples into the back at an angle too. Unfortunately, that never crossed my mind, and we had to go back with some wire cutters to fix my mistake.
What an idiot!
The right side of the closet is going to be a combination of hanging racks and shelves, which means more large wooden boxes. The last built-in is a jewelry cabinet. All the other cubbies will have wood trim, but the jewelry cabinet will have the plywood edges exposed, so we used iron-on edge banding to pretty up the edges. I used strips of poplar to make face frames for all the built-ins, and I installed crown molding along the top perimeter. Then Mrs. CityBilly painted everything white. I used more poplar to build the frames for the drawer fronts. Then I routed out a channel for the 1/2 inch plywood center to sit in. I used some scrap plywood to make a template so all the drawer pulls were centered. After I centered each drawer front, I used the holes I drilled for the pulls to install some 1-inch construction screws. These will hold the drawer front in place while I attach permanent screws from the inside of the drawer. Then I can remove the temporary screws and attach the drawer pulls. The final touches for the built-ins were hanging the closet rods and installing the adjustable shelves. This shelf pin jig from Craig is super easy to use and keeps your pinholes level and evenly spaced.
Battery's dead.
Our original plan for the flooring was to install luxury vinyl tile, but we found some leftover engineered hardwood in the bargain aisle that we just couldn't pass up. First, we put down some underlayment padding. Then we installed the wood planks with a flooring nailer.
So in true CityBilly fashion, this project took way longer than we expected, but Mrs. CityBilly's closet is finally done. Follow us on Instagram to keep up with all the projects we're working on here at the CityBilly Ranch. As far as the Master Suite project goes, we're going to get to work on my closet, then we'll build some sliding barn doors for both closets. And of course, we've got a bunch of other projects going on simultaneously, so the next video that comes out is anybody's guess. We'll see you then.